is a bit warm. Who is here for the first time? Where have you been? Please come back. You'll see on the list here things that you've missed, like Judy Dench. But next week, Jimmy Carr, Hannah Rothschild, Nick Sirota, Andrew Marr. Yeah, week after, Nicholas Parsons, who's 93. Duke of Marlborough, Julian Fellows, Marietta Steno, and Kirsty Young. So this is the best kept secret. £6. Okay, what happens is that I have a conversation with our guest, people who are not really ordinary people, but are leading or have led rather extraordinary lives. And then I'm going to open it to you, the audience, for questions and answers, because that's the whole point of this forum. Main point of this forum is to let anybody who come in for £6 and ask questions. The only proviso is that they need to be intelligent. And if they're rude, I will insist on their answering. Anyway, look, the whole point of why I invited Lord and Lady Weymouth is because I think they occupy a very unique position in a society which is fast changing, where estates, huge houses, titles, aristocracy, they're all going out of fashion. And if you asked the younger generation today, those who voted for Corbyn, for example, they wouldn't know what they're talking about. They wouldn't know all these people. And if they knew, they probably wouldn't give a toss. But the point is that they uniquely, as a young couple, relatively young couple, very relatively young couple compared to all the other farts who own huge estates, have got an enormous enterprise in their hands. And they are the ones who still, I hope, retain a sense of history, which this country defines for me as being a characteristic that is also fast disappearing. And I like to find out from them how they manage. They're a young family, they've got 2 kids, like a lot of people, but they've got this huge estate, which goes back to the 11th, 12th century, and even more extraordinarily, they've got a safari park. I mean, I'd like to hear from Sir Olin what happened to the grandfather who started it. I mean, you know these programs called Country House Rescues, where they ran out of money completely, and they didn't know how to maintain and keep the house. And was he thinking that he wasn't able to, and that he got to bring in some animals and so forth? And it is, for me, an extraordinary invention to start thinking about a safari park in the middle of this garden designed originally by Capability Brown. And I think that's a genius idea, but we like to hear that. But in fact, let's have it now. Tell us how it all started. What gave him the idea? I mean, we read legends like Tarzan, right? Lord Greystoke, but he's fictional. Who gave your forefathers this idea of a safari park and bringing animals in and starting something which he believed would not only attract people, but bring in a bit of cash?
So we have a video to show you, which perhaps we can go into after the answer to this question. But the answer to your question, if I might backpedal from it slightly, is that in 1949, my grandfather was faced with huge death duties. So the Attlee government was really the first properly socialist government that the UK had known. And
how much?
Sorry?
How much?
The percentage of death duties.
No, how much was the death duty?
What, in absolute terms?
Yes.
I can't remember. All I can tell you is that 2/3 of the estate was sold off. And he realized that some way, somehow, the estate was, or at least the house, was going to have to...
So he had to sell off 2/3 of the
sold off
estate
2/3,
in order to pay the death duty.
Correct.
1949.
1949.
Who was the Prime Minister then?
Attlee.
Attlee, well,
Attlee.
yes, he was very Labour. What? Kill him.
He is dead.
He was very Labour,
And
yes.
I'm not making any political comment on whether that was right or wrong. It's just those were the facts. And so having sold off 2/3 of the estate, he decided that, or he came to the realization that, this is to some degree the shape of things to come, and the house is going to have to pay its way. So he opened the house to the public in 49.
What was it? One of the first?
It was the first.
It was the first, and he charged.
Yeah, and society was quite scandalized by that. This idea that you would allow people who you'd never met before into your house for money. This was really not how things were done.
The other aristo ganged up on him, obviously.
They ganged up a bit, but then they soon all copied.
Yes.
So it was a ganging up followed by a copying, and that was all fine, and it worked well enough, but it wasn't enough. And then in just before 1966, Jimmy Chipperfield approached him. I don't know how many of you know, but Chipperfield's circus. Yeah, exactly.
The circus dwarf.
They were,
I think he was a dwarf, wasn't he? Or was it Tom?
No, Jimmy wasn't a dwarf.
Yes, I'm thinking of the other
seen
one.
Pictures.
What was the other name of the other circus dwarf? What? Bertram Mills, yes.
They may have had dwarfs in their circus back then. But he approached my grandfather and said something along the lines of, I've got the animals and the expertise, you've got the land and the sort of anchor to bring people to a place, so let's make a joint venture. And that's how it started out until we subsequently bought out the Chipperfields.
And that was also charged. I mean, that was it like a circus, or was it, he started off as a safari park?
It started off as a safari park and was groundbreaking in that regard. So before Longleat Safari Park, the first safari park in the world, outside of Africa, of course, opened to the public in '66. If you wanted to see exotic animals, you either had to be very rich and go to Africa, or you could see them in a book, or you could see them in a cage in a zoo. And if you imagine what a zoo was like in the 1960s, not a very nice experience. So it completely changed the whole nature.
But from day one, you have to drive in. Is that right?
Yeah, drive through.
And
started with 50 lions.
And a lot of people criticized you for it, for being dangerous and all that sort of stuff.
It was debated in the Houses of Parliament. And
when was the first accident?
Well, there hasn't been one.
I thought that there was one very recently where a lion climbed onto a car and tried to molest a woman inside.
I think this may have been your last Tuesday night's dream, David.
All right, so the safari park was successful, and then your family bought it out.
There was a great deal of concern because people thought that the lions would escape, that they would kill people, and there was a lot of consternation that they might interbreed with the domestic pet community.
But in fact, the result was that recently you've had to cull a few because they were getting too amorous and were producing far too many cubs. Is that right?
Well, that was an unhappy period, and the problem was actually genetic abnormalities as a result of inbreeding, which
they had what, freaks?
No,
yes.
not freaks, but there were
violent
issues.
Yes,
but we're safely past that point now.
All right. So that went on, and when you were growing up, do you remember distinctly the safari park? And have you got one or two stories to tell us about how amusing story or frightening story about your encounter with all the animals, other than your family?
Those are the more extreme and amusing ones, but we're not going there today, David.
Well, we never know. We might get a question or two about your dear father.
I mean, as a child, there are two real abiding memories. One is a baby tiger cub with
Bring your phone nearer to you, the microphone. Yeah.
right. One abiding memory is a baby tiger cub with a cat's collar on it, with a lead, being walked around the main square at Longleat, and being able to pick up this tiger cub and pet it, which of course is something that just wouldn't happen now. The way that animal husbandry is done just wouldn't allow for that. But that's a pretty distinct memory. And another one is I went to the local primary school, and school ended at 3 o'clock or whatever. And I forget why, but for a temporary period, we had a baby brown bear. I mean, the kind of brown bear that when it grows up is extremely dangerous. And I used to go home from school and have a sort of a 15-minute cuddle with this baby brown bear until the bear started to get to an age where this would be dangerous, and then it went to breed with other bears in another place. So those are two abiding memories there.
Well, let me bring in Emma now.
Would it be opportune to just to play the video?
Let me just. Yeah, don't worry. I'm in charge. I can pace you. But Emma, so when you first met Saul and you knew about the safari park and so forth, did he try to impress you? I mean, I know Damien Aspinall did with all his girlfriends, tried to push them into the cave with the apes and so forth. What did he try to do to get you into bed? I mean, to get you into the cage? Were you afraid of all the animals, or were you apprehensive, or what?
No, I'm probably not scared enough of those animals. So I jumped in with, I think we just started giraffe feeding at the time. So it was the
giraffe feeding?
Yeah.
But that's not dangerous.
Really
we saw the Queen feeding the giraffe the other day.
Yeah, not dangerous. Well, no, we feed lions now, which are a few of my friends here have fed the lions with me, and actually when they roar at you, it is frightening, even though you do it from behind the bars.
No, but I mean, only the other days, there were two incidents. There was the lion just went berserk and ate up this woman and so forth. Aren't you afraid?
I think the answer is we have a very good team who are highly trained.
Yeah.
And
All right,
let's
play the video. Can somebody put the video on?
Where is the video?
Hello.
We've got audio.
Oh, it's there. Come on, wake up. Whilst she's doing that, how many visitors do you get in a safari park a year?
Well, the number of paying visitors overall last year, and that excludes 3-year-olds and under, was just under 1 million.
And,
and the vast majority of those go through the safari park.
Yeah. And okay, so do you think the safari park can be a surviving enterprise?
Yes, but it needs to be augmented with other experiences. So the safari park is a drive-through experience. It's our anchor experience. But then you need behind-the-scenes feeding experiences, and you also need much more, you need a set of much more immersive experiences. So we have a very large walk-through area where there are no physical barriers between the guest and the animals. For example, we created the world's first, or at least certainly Europe's first, walk-through meerkat enclosure where there's no physical barrier, so the meerkats are scampering over your feet and jumping in and out of ladies' handbags you know.
How do you deal with health and safety? I mean, aren't there inspectors who come and tell you about health and safety?
It's a huge issue. We have a significant department devoted to that. There are very strict regulations. We're monitored on a very regular basis, on a local authority level and a national level, and it's something that is very much at the forefront of
where do you hire all those rangers and so forth? I mean, are they difficult to find, employ, or are there many who are only too glad to be able to be employed?
In terms of the animal-specific roles, that's not so difficult, because the people who want to do that kind of job, it really is a labor of love, and so finding them isn't so difficult. In terms of the wider park, it's extremely difficult. We're in an area where unemployment is less than 1%. Since the referendum, all of the Eastern Europeans have gone home. They don't feel welcome. And recruitment is a huge problem. And so at our peak, about 30% of our non-animal staff are agency staff, because we just can't recruit in this environment. The competition is fierce. There's practically full employment. We have gone substantially above the national living wage into age categories where it's not legislated for, and you simply have to do that to compete with the baseline in the marketplace.
You've got about 1,200 animals, right?
We have about 1,200 animals and just over 1,000 species.
How many staff?
So at peak, we're around 1,000 staff.
So 1-to-1. I mean,
yeah, but
the Mandarin Oriental look cheap.
That includes 2 small hotels as well.
Sorry, what's the hotel got to do with it? Oh,
As
no, I'm
part of
talking
the
about
overall labour force.
Yes, yes.
So excluding the hotels, we're at around 750.
The Safari Park enterprise itself makes money?
Yeah, very much so.
How much?
You can go to Company's House and
I think it was about £200,000, wasn't it?
It's a lot more than that, David.
Really?
Fortunately, yeah.
Well, how much do you pay yourself?
Very little.
How much?
I'm not answering.
Is that not still working?
But I mean, on a top-line basis, our revenue this year will be in the region of £35 million. To give you an idea.
On the whole, you have to look after the house, Safari Park. You turned it round, if I understood it, because I think you have luckily experienced also in the hospitality business before, so you know about hospitality business that links up with the hotels, the drive-through, the inspection of the house and the enjoyment, the restaurants, the shops, and all that. Presumably, are you comfortable now that you have set up a structure which is good enough for sustainable future?
Now, yes, we had a bad experience and a troublesome period where a former chief executive had to be extracted, and so
eaten by a lion.
Metaphorically
yes.
speaking.
It was just no good.
Well, it was a bit more than that. There were goings on that really shouldn't have been going on. So in having been really frozen out of the business for a considerable period of time, I had to move into his office in the early autumn of 2013 and start from scratch, and found things in a very precarious state. The situation we're in now is that every single departmental head bar one has been changed. We have an excellent chief executive. We have an excellent general manager under that chief executive. We have an excellent finance director about to start. So yes, I would say the management structure now
Let's watch it
stable.
Whilst it works.
Is it working though?
Is that you climbing?
That's not us.
What? Wrong video. Anthony Gormley.
It's the
All right. So you've now got, and you think that you've got something which is sustainable.
Yeah, I'm quite sure
Because
of that, yeah.
look, both of you are young and so forth. You will probably have to spend the rest of your life both trying to preserve what you have inherited, so are you excited by everything, or are you a bit bored, or are you very nervous about the way in which things could go wrong in a very fragile way?
I think once you've got the depth and breadth to the management structure, then as long as you stay close to the business, there's no need to be concerned about things going wrong quickly. We've got that degree of stability, and what's exciting is the opportunity to replicate this in other jurisdictions. So we're looking at North America. We have a potential project in New York State. We're looking at China. Just got back.
What do you do? What, replicate Longleat or a safari park or what in New York?
Well, all of the key component parts. So there would be, or there will be, a full-size replica of the house. You have to have that because that's the branding.
Well, in New York.
USP in New York.
I know that China would love that. I
and
know
in
that
China.
you have been sucking up to the Chinese like mad. I came and witnessed it when you had that extraordinary, what do you call it, Festival of Light.
Festival of
Emma,
Light, yeah.
tell us something about the Festival of Light.
Festival of Light gets bigger and bigger every year, and it is amazing. It's the hardest thing to describe in photos, or I wish get my iPhone out and try to show people what it is, because they're called lanterns, but they're not actually lanterns. Some of them are as tall, if not taller than the house.
I mean, they're replicating buildings in China, but lit.
Lit up, made of silk.
Around your estate, and people go around it after dark.
Yeah.
And they are extraordinary. And you had the first one about, what, 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, and so last year it was our 50th anniversary, and it was Beatrix Potter's 150th. So we had a collaborative display. So we had Peter Rabbit and his sisters and Jeremy Fisher on the lake with an enormous trout coming out of the lake about to eat him, and Squirrel Nutkin all through the trees. It's so imaginative. It's done so well. It takes months to build. About 60 workmen will arrive in September and stay with us all the way through till we open.
There was a program, I saw it,
Yeah.
and they demanded Chinese food, which you couldn't provide.
They have a chef. They have a chef.
They eventually
Yeah, yeah.
brought in a chef, exactly.
Yeah, they eat. We had dinner
Yeah.
with them.
And then I think your husband is trying to go and persuade them to find a place where they can replicate the whole thing in China, which of course China has done. I mean, China has replicated Versailles, there's a Chateau Lafite, God knows what. I mean, there's an English village, in fact, in Shanghai, and Longleat might be first. How's that project going? I mean, the way you were sucking up to the Chinese, I was so embarrassed.
We're still sucking up remorse.
Yes, exactly. Yes, make sure they pay you, because we Chinese don't pay half the time. That's the only problem. But I mean, they will produce Longleat extremely well. The only thing they won't do is to be able to replicate the inside. They're very bad inside. They're very good outside. Inside is not very good. Mind you, if they have to replicate your father's inside, that might be less difficult. Yes. Is it not playing at all? Well, there it is. Sorry. Let's forget about that for the moment. Now,
we don't have to be authentic in every regard as to the inside.
yes. But now you got two young children, John, your heir, and then you had a surrogate baby in America. Tell us, is it true that if you had a surrogate baby in England, the natural mother has the right to retain the child, and that's why you went to America?
Yeah. The law is better in America, that it's very clear that Henry's our baby, and because I was very ill when I had John, so we went down the surrogate route, and we created Henry, and a surrogate carried him for us. And in California, the law is that no matter what happens, as soon as he's born, he will be our baby. So that's why we did it there.
Yeah. How did you choose the surrogate mother?
So the agency I knew through a family friend who did it many, many years ago, and we went and met them in California, and she introduced us to one only one candidate.
Only one candidate.
Because they match you, and we got on very well, and it was 1 year between meeting her and actually having the baby, which I think is quite quick,
Yes.
considering it's such an enormous thing to do.
What was the oddest thing that you experienced through this extraordinary process?
I think just being so impressed by the medical science. After 5 days, when they have the embryos, they can tell you the sex of the embryo and the strength of the embryo.
You can choose.
So you can so you choose the healthiest one, effectively. But they already know which are boys, which are girls, and how, and if they're,
Weren't you seduced by the prospect of a girl, having had a boy?
We were, but all the healthiest ones were boys. So you just have to choose the healthiest one.
Yes.
But it was incredible watching the scientists create your baby behind a glass wall in Newport Beach.
Yes. And then you went when the delivery came, presumably.
We were there at the birth.
Yes, exactly.
I would say that was probably the strangest part of the
What,
experience.
seeing your baby coming out of somebody else's doodah?
Yeah, it's a little unusual.
It was awkward for Sulan.
I was at the other end, so
Yeah.
I didn't specifically see that
I
moment.
Yes.
In fact, I was looking away for so long, I turned around and was like, oh my God, he's there.
But I mean, when you talk to the surrogate mother, does she have any emotions? I mean, obviously she must have some emotions, but they do it for money.
No, the amount of the degree of compensation isn't it's a new kitchen. It's not life changing.
What sort of kitchen? IKEA or?
Well, not your kind of kitchen, David. So they do it for a host of other reasons, and this particular individual. Well, I don't know, Emma.
She has had 4 children already.
She has 3 of her own.
Yeah.
And she is an amazing woman. She has a lovely family. And at the birth, she was very emotional and saying how happy she was for us and how happy she was to be able to do this for us. And I think that's what the motivation is. For her, she enjoys being pregnant. She feels wonderful when she's pregnant. And she was just happy to, now we're part of each other's lives.
Who monitors the fact that it's your sperm and it's your egg?
Well,
I mean, when you go through to the lawyer and so forth, surely that's one of the questions you would ask.
So obviously you have to go to a reputable lab, but for immigration purposes you have to do a DNA test, and so we do have conclusive proof that it is definitely both of our DNA.
Yeah, and it looks a little bit like you half.
He looks a lot like me and nothing like Emma, unfortunately for him.
Well, I would investigate this DNA test. Yes. All right, well, that's extraordinary. Okay, look, listen, I'm sure you've got more fascinating question before the video will work. Who's got a question? Wait, get a microphone. No. You listen to me because it's on YouTube, you stupid woman.
Emma, I'm sure a lot of people here have been to your kitchen. I hope some of you had. Do tell us more about your magnificent new kitchen. It's so beautiful. Tell us more about that.
Thank you.
Get rid of this now. Is that all right?
So Emma's kitchen is in the historical kitchen at Longleat, and it was inspired by a desire to make Longleat make sense.
It's a public restaurant.
It's a shop.
A shop,
So
okay.
in the sense that Longleat used to grow a lot of fruits and vegetables and produce a lot of food, and there's such an immense history of food at Longleat. So now everything in Emma's kitchen is inspired by the archive, whatever was served or grown on the estate. And now we're bringing back beehives to Longleat, and we're growing in Capability Brown's walled garden again, and we planted a vineyard. So I'm working hard on elevating.
So you've got a brand developer who would do jams, bread, and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Could be a sort of budding Waitrose.
I hope so.
Yes. Good. All right.
Going well, thanks.
Emma's
Version
kitchen,
of Dalesford
remember.
that makes money. Sorry, Lady Bamford.
Who's been to Longleat, the safari park? Well, you better start going, for God's sake. Yes. All right. Okay. Yes. Question.
Yeah, I was just wondering the future of Longleat. I mean, we've seen the change in zoos. how are you going to keep people interested over the next 10 to 20 years to keep visiting? And what's the future for something like your safari park? How do you make it more interactive with people, especially young children, to get them interested?
I mean, that's the perennial question, which, you know, every year we're finding a new way to solve that, or a new way to maintain Longleat's relevance for our audience, which of course centres around young children. We've just completed a 15-year master plan in terms of the infrastructure that we'll need to put in over that period. But of course, the component parts that make up the individual experiences, what we anticipate now for 3 years from now might be broadly correct, but anything beyond that, it'll change wildly between the current anticipation and what it ends up being in 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 years'
Like
time.
all businesses. I mean, you can make a 15-year plan, but
Like all businesses.
you'll be surprised if the 3-year plan actually fall into place. But you have to plan. There's no question.
You have to plan, and one of the strategies that we've centered around is rather than endlessly spending huge amounts of capital on building new attractions, which will start to get a bit dog-eared after just 2 or 3 years, we're focusing on seasonal festivals. So we have our annual Wintertime Festival of Light, the giant Chinese lanterns. It was the first time in Europe that anybody had seen structures illuminated like that. And then we have our summertime festivals. A couple of years ago we had animatronic dinosaurs. This year we have giant monumental size animatronic bugs. So we're constantly weaving in influences that will hopefully resonate with children and provide an immersive and emotive experience, which is really a fancy way of saying we want the kid to pester mum and say, I really remember that and I loved it and I want to go back there.
And I mean, you need people to come on board to give you new ideas. I mean, robots, artificial intelligence, holograms. I mean, all of these things will suddenly appear in front of our eyes, I think, in the next 10 years. And they will be the things which will relate to the younger generation. So
100%. And, you know, last year we did our first toe in the water with augmented reality on the walls of some of the outbuildings. This winter we intend to do a lot more with that. So exactly, as you say, you weave in technology.
because the world is changing so much. When are you going to get Mr. Corbyn to come and visit Longleat?
We will, well, now that you and he are very good friends, maybe you can pass on the invitation.
All right, well, you might feed him to the lions. Does it work now? Sorry, can you all see it? We're so excited. This is going to be the most amazing event. We have 20 fire balloons lined up right in front of the fantastic Longleat house celebrating 50th anniversary. And we're quite away from an amazing night there.
It's English countryside at its best, with the excitement that hippos are going to pop up out of the water.
It's great value for money. I've got 3 kids, and there's something that for the various ages, and there's something to keep them all interested. Very, very
Very good. Very good propaganda. I mean, it is a, no, but it's very well done. But it is extraordinary. The more I think about it, without flattering you, is that you've got a real jewel and a developed one, which has got every opportunity of succeeding, and it's very exciting. Any other question? One minute. Speak.
That I saw on television. and
Start again. Say that again.
Might you consider making another program for television, like the one you did before? It was a fascinating insight into your home, and I think it's when you had the first Chinese festival. It was fascinating.
That was
just wondered.
how many?
I was looking forward to a follow-up.
Tell us about the documentary.
Okay, so we made a program called All Change at Longleat a few years ago, which ran as 3 one-hour episodes on BBC One, but it took 2 years to make, I think. So over that time, I had John. We did our first Festival of Light, and there were lots of changes. The program covered the house, the village, the family, the safari, everything. So it was an enormous project. They filmed 600 hours of footage and edited it down to 3 hours. And since then, we have filmed more Animal Park, which is our daytime TV show on the BBC, which ran for many, many years and then ended, but has actually come back. So we're very happy to have Animal Park back. And there are other potential television shows on the burner for UK and for US television. There's interest from American networks. So I will keep you posted.
and some of it to do with personally interest in you as very grand, glamorous Marchioness, with your love of fashion, nature, cakes, whatever it is, kitchen and so forth.
Cakes.
Do you love all that?
Yes, lifestyle. That's what they call it.
Lifestyle, sorry, yes, lifestyle.
Yeah.
Do you intend in developing an Emma lifestyle, Longleat lifestyle?
I think so. I think it's such a fascinating place and so much happens. And whether we make a show or not, we do everything anyway. So people often approach us, production companies often approach us saying, can we make a show about this? Various aspects that interest them. They come and they film a pilot, and then we wait and we hear back or we don't, and it goes on like that. It's a sort of relay race, it feels like to me, between the ones who are making more progress than others. And at the moment, there's a very exciting project in America that might be happening, that's been going on for 1.5 years up till this point. And so fingers crossed, it will go ahead, and then that will be the next one.
What will it be? Give us a hint.
It will be about me developing my brand and business at Longleat and taking on the challenges that I haven't before, and the risks. They love a bit of risk factor. So the challenges that I will face at Longleat, at home in London, and obviously my family, and Longleat generally as the backdrop, which they find so interesting because it's such a new concept for them.
Okay, let me ask a question. I mean, your father-in-law, your father, Seolin, must be pleased about how things are going. I mean, he's not stupid. He sees that you have seized the control and management of this enormous estate and so forth, and seems as if you breath of life into it, and sustainability, potential, and so forth. Has he ever asked you to go and see him and say, "Well done, boy"? Don't be
David,
modest.
You're presuming an element of logic, which within the dynamics of my family is something you should never
What,
do.
you think they're irrational?
I probably
But
should
you love
do
your
that.
father.
Sure, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that the scene that you've just said is necessarily the one that happens.
But it hasn't gone worse. It can only go better. We're trying to understand the relationship and everything. I mean, no more violent arguments. Or have you taken down more as murals?
No, I haven't. There's definitely a moratorium on that. But no, David, it would be inappropriate for me to say any
Really?
more, to be honest.
Well, I think you should. All right, question? If you press him, he might leak a few things. You might, yes.
How significant is branding in developing your different interests? Do you think about that often? Do you consider yourself a lifestyle brand or a hospitality brand, or does that really not enter into it? It seems like you have your finger in so many pots. I'm just curious.
So branding really is the fundamental key, both in terms of what Emma does specifically and Longleat more broadly. And when we go to upstate New York, or when we go to Sichuan province in China, it's all about the brand. There are other safari parks in the world, but none of them have quite the brand equity that Longleat has. So the brand is everything, and we think about it all the time. Well, both, because it's
called Longleat.
It's the combination.
Is the safari park called the Longleat Safari Park?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So it's Longleat, Longleat, Longleat.
Yes.
Presumably,
yes.
that's going to be your brand.
I mean, and that's why whether we recreate Longleat in upstate New York, or in Sichuan province in China, or in Nanjing in China, or wherever it might be, the house always, there has to be certain elements territorially that are redolent of Longleat. So you need a certain degree of rolling hills, you need a good body of water on which the full-size replica of the house can sit proudly, and those elements, those component parts, to a minimum degree, have to be in every rollout we do. Otherwise, it would just be a hodgepodge of different elements of Longleat scattered in various different jurisdictions, which wouldn't work.
How about Las Vegas?
Well, you laugh. We've looked at it. We did have a business trip to Vegas a couple of years ago, not to recreate Longleat, but to potentially provide an immersive animal attraction as an add-on to one of the hotels that can no longer rely on the gambling business to sustain it, because that's
Well, how about a
taken
safari
big hit.
casino? You'll be playing blackjack and then lions come up and lick you.
It's an idea, David. When we sit down to dinner, you can elaborate your plan.
All right. Yes. Question there. But 1 minute. Come on. Come on.
I can also throw. Do you think that the family and the history of the family is a big part of the brand? Because you've mentioned the safari park and the house, but if you just recreate that somewhere else without the family connection, could it be anybody that could run that? Are you intending that the family are still going to be a big part of the brand?
I think the history of Longleat in the broadest sense is absolutely an inherent part of the brand. And it's something that within the UK is interesting to our guests to a degree, but only to a degree. But when you go abroad, certainly to the US, certainly to China, it takes on a whole new resonance. And, you know, the exact story behind Sir John Thynne buying the priory back in the 16th century and, you know, recreating the first house which burnt down and then building it again and everything that happened thereafter. Whereas that's of a cursory interest to our domestic clientele, it's of huge importance to our potential foreign clientele.
I mean, it's very confusing. You have your name Thynne, you have Lord Bath, you have the Marquis, you're a Viscount. I mean, nobody knows what the hell is going on. America certainly wouldn't understand. We in China actually have exactly the same aristocracy as you. I mean, you know, you have here the Duke, Marquis, Earl, Viscount, Baron. We in China have exactly the same 5 ranking in aristocracy. So an educated Chinese might understand it. But it is very confusing. I mean, do you brand the name Bath or Thin or what? It is very confusing.
Well, the confusion is useful because in both the US and China, they kind of assume that you're part of the royal family. So we do nothing to disabuse them of that notion.
Yes. But I mean, it's confusing with the word Bath, because then people say, oh, I know Bath, you know, the city, which is not too far away. But it is. I mean, a lot of people do regard you. I mean, my Chinese compatriots have whispered to me, is this, how close are you to the Queen? And I said, like that, you know.
Yeah.
So it's very good.
Of all the gloriously eccentric aristocratic families this country has produced, you probably have the claim to being the most gloriously eccentric. I'm wondering whether that eccentricity, presumably it's been helpful to the Longleat brand over the years, but is that something you plan to cultivate into your generation and the next, or are you sort of secretly hoping John will turn out to be a little bit boring?
John at the moment thinks he's Bruno Mars, so I'm not sure how much of an office job he thinks he's going to have. We'll wait and see. I think you've been trying to be the businessman, you know, all the time, and we'll see what Henry might be a scientist. I feel like Henry will be the serious one, and John will be Lenny Kravitz. So we'll wait and see, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, eccentricity isn't something that you can cultivate, because then it just becomes a sort of pseudo affectation. But so we're not trying to cultivate it in or out. It'll be what it'll be. But yes, I do think John will be a version of Lenny Kravitz.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Well, 1 minute.
Sorry, David, I dare not. Thank you for sharing this. What a lovely, fascinating story, really.
Have you been to Longleat?
No, and I will be soon going before.
Don't be so stupid. Go tomorrow. It's a glorious weekend.
I accept your
How
order.
much is the safari park?
Sorry?
How much is the entry for the safari park?
Full price walk-up ticket for an adult, $33.95.
Here we are.
That's not. Yeah, you
But
can
if
have.
you book online before midnight, you get a 50% discount.
Oh, that's a deal.
Typical
Typical
Indian
And Chinese
attitude.
mentality.
All right, ask your question.
Well, I was kind of saying that in terms of, obviously you want to protect it and kind of roll it on through the generations, and any kind of thoughts in terms of, you know, having a more corporate structure. For example, last year, as you know, the Brighton Pier was sold by the family, and are you kind of looking at an IPO, making it a more proper corporate structure, and what are your kind of thoughts on that?
It's a very interesting question, and
Thank you.
the answer to that really depends on what happens with this nascent international expansion and where it goes. But if, as seems likely, we do have a project in North America, and if, as at this stage, as seems hopeful, we do have several projects in China, and then, you know, before we start to think about other jurisdictions, then some sort of IPO would be the natural progression. But it would be premature to be thinking about that right now, today.
But what must be pressing you must be the death duty upon the demise of your father, surely.
Well, that's not really an issue, because everything was put into trust a long time ago. And so the taxable event, if you like, of a transfer from one generation to another is something that you can structure away.
But there might be a lot of domestic dispute. I mean, your father has about 49 wifelets, hasn't he? I mean,
Yeah,
I've
I mean,
seen
you
the
can't-
portraits
you
going up the
can't-
staircase.
You can't legislate for that. And there is no legal structure you can put in place to mitigate against that. So that will be what it'll be, David.
All right, yes.
Emma and Seol, and Who inspires you individually?
Ooh, good question.
Who inspired you what?
Specifically in what generally, or for the... Oh, wow. Huge question. Who's your business inspiration? What do you want Longleat to be?
No,
I think
Anna,
Longleat...
You answer for yourself.
Okay.
I've got my answer.
You got your answer? Good one. Oh, I wish I could... You go first.
Come on, you can see it coming. Emma inspires me.
Oh.
I was well, I can't say that.
Who inspires you?
I'm inspired by... I can't say you. I'm inspired
No, but
by...
I mean, which businesswoman in the world would you love to be in order to realize your dream of branding Longleat and doing the lifestyle things that you like to do?
Yeah.
Who is your model? Who is your icon?
I think, well, the trouble is what we do, there isn't a model to follow, and I sort of pick and choose as I grow, and I'm learning so much as I go. So I look at sort of who has made it internationally, who can be a voice of an influential voice who is heard. Sort of people like Alex Schulman, I suppose. I've met her a few times, and
Alexander Schulman.
yeah, she's an interesting character here.
Because she's passé. She's
No, I know,
resigned.
but she doesn't matter. She's achieved a lot here.
All right. Well,
But not as I just think it's such a huge business that we have to run and it's to get it right. And I sort of try and help Seulin and support Seulin. And I'm just inspired by the fact, it's more inspired by Longleat. It's sort of feeling that Longleat, it's such a pleasure and a joy, and we're so lucky. But I feel like Longleat was built as a family house, and I want to do it justice and make it the best that it can be. So when I read, you know, the height of the children on our wall going back to 1720 or something, I feel enormous pressure from the previous generations to do the best job that we can do for our children. And there's not really anyone specifically that has done this.
Why didn't you replicate Longleat in Nigeria?
I mean, that would be pretty complicated.
There's a lot of corrupt money. You might as well catch it while
Well, no
it
one's
lasts.
offered. Maybe if they could bring us up, we'll go and see.
Right. Longleat at Lagos.
Can you
It would
imagine?
be very good. A lot of wild animals as well. Okay. Question? Yes. One there and one there.
Were you ever expecting, before they changed the rules, to be able to sit in the House of Lords? And now you look back on it, does it seem strange that people could be in Parliament just by virtue of their family? And would you actually have enjoyed doing it? Would you have felt a sense of pride and public duty and enjoyment, or would that be a distraction from running a business?
So there are a number of different answers to various bits of your question there. So when my father did once every 5 years sit in the House of Lords, I had this bizarre right to sit on the steps of the throne to listen to him, which I think I did once, and it felt very, very uncomfortable. But I discovered on that day that they had heavily subsidized bars. And so I used to take my friends from university, my freshman university friends from Ifor Evans Hall in Camden, where we lived. And I used to take them to the House of Lords and go to one of the bars it turns out that we weren't allowed to drink in, and we would be a bunch of students getting drunk for very little money. And getting away with this, I decided to push it a step further. So on one occasion I said, can I put that on my father's tab? And they said, oh my God, you're not him. And kind of ushered me out of this bar into a bar down another corridor where you could be. But so looking back, of course, is utterly preposterous that any of that could have happened. And I was a big supporter of the end to the hereditary principle in 1997, but I would have liked to have seen an elected upper chamber with the democratic legitimacy allowing all of the powers that were taken away in 1911 and other dates restored, so that we have a truly bicameral system.
Yeah, but
Sorry to
look at
get
it
boring
now.
about it.
I know, but look at it now. I mean, they're absolutely crammed full of cronies.
Exactly.
Yeah. But would you, if somebody asked you, would you have considered joining?
No, I think if you're going to do it, you've got to run for election. I think there is there's a legitimate argument for a portion of that chamber being appointed for having done good works or whatever it might be, but the whole chamber being a sort of den of cronies is as you say, it's a complete disaster.
Personal question, this one. What was it like being brought up with a father who lived such an unconventional life with wifelets and so on and so forth? What was that like for you? Was it fun? Was it different, or was it not?
So looking back now, I can see just how incredibly odd it was. But at the time, you only know the reality you know. So although there were elements of it that bothered me, and of course I could see the contrast with the way my friends' families conducted their lives. It was still my prevailing reality at that time, and so it was what it was, if you'll excuse the facile expression. It's only with the benefit of hindsight that you look back and think, wow, that really was quite strange.
Let me ask you, I mean, you obviously, as I said, have set yourself as an example, very successful. Do other states and people involved with the states come and seek your advice and say, ring you up and say, look, Sione, can I come and see you and seek your advice? Do they come flocking to you to look for inspirations and ideas and so forth, because they can see what you're doing works? And there must be so many other states and people who must be struggling.
Well, this is probably going to sound arrogant, but generally they just copy.
What, like Knowsley up north with Lord Derby, with his safari park?
Well, there are things like we redesigned our website, then all of the other stately home and safari park websites took on a similar kind of structure, and we did the first Festival of Light, and now there are giant Chinese lanterns all over the country, and so.
Imitation is the highest form of
It is.
flattery,
It is. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Well, you should try to monetize it. I mean, I don't know, patent it or something. Yes. And tell the Chinese only come to you. Yes. All right, let's have a last question. Yes.
I'm actually here to ask Sir David about his meeting with President Putin. Joke. Yeah. But anyway, I'm Russian, and I would like to ask the wonderful couple, might you consider opening a safari park in Russia? Because I don't think there is one there, and we have a lot of bears. And cubs too, bear cubs too. Pretty. Thank you.
Shall I answer that one?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I've spent quite a lot of time in Russia, and had a period of trying to develop some fairly modest hotels, which didn't end well. The first iteration, my business partners were Yukos, and so you know what happened there. So there's an element of once bitten, twice shy, and if getting or a series of 120 bedroom mid-market hotels of no architectural consequence off the ground proves to be impossible, I think recreating Longleat might be a step too far.
Listen, the hour is out, and it's been very pleasant, I have to say. And I just want to wish them well. They're Solin and Emma are very good friends of mine, and I tease them endlessly, but I have to say they have actually got it right, and every time I go to Longleat and a safari park, and the Festival of Light, they all flourish. And there aren't very many solid, serious estates all over Britain which can boast that sort of livelihood. And that's the whole point, is to make it alive. And I know that Longleat is alive. And I remember when I first came to Britain, the first thing I went to see was Stonehenge. And as I left, going towards Bath, I saw this most beautiful house in the distance on a beautiful summer's day, all the shadows and the leaves and the sun shimmering. And at 13, I said, I wish one day I would be able to have a house like this, and if not, at least know the people who lived in it. And then I read about this crazy man called Marquis of Bath, and I thought, well, I'll never meet him because he's a complete freak. But little did I know subsequently that I met Seolin, and I'm very, very proud to be able to say that as a result of sucking up to him, I've now stayed in the house, I've walked around the park, I've opened the Festival of Light, and I am at least small connection to this wonderful estate. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Seolin and Emma.